The stone hall reeked of pine smoke and something sharper, something primal. Dominance. The kind of scent that made weaker wolves tuck their tails and bare their throats without thinking. I stood pressed against the back wall, fingers twisted so hard in the coarse fabric of my dress that my knuckles had gone white, watching the gathering unfold with the sick inevitability of watching storm clouds devour a clear sky. Every unmated she-wolf in the territories had been summoned. Not invited. Summoned. When the rogue court calls, you do not send regrets. You do not politely decline. You show up, or your entire pack answers for your absence. The floor beneath my worn boots was cold grey stone, ancient and unforgiving. I had scrubbed those boots this morning until my fingers cramped, trying to make them look like they belonged here among the daughters of generals and warriors, females who moved through the press of bodies like they owned not just the air they breathed, but the very ground they walked on. Their hair gleamed in the torchlight. Raven black, honey gold, deep chestnut. All of it styled with oils and braids that probably took hours, not like my own fire-coloured strands that I had barely managed to twist into something that would not fall apart before nightfall. "Stand straight," my mother had hissed at me before we entered. "For once in your life, Mesgabe, do not make us look weak." Weak. The word had stalked me since childhood, since the day my wolf first emerged during my 13th winter. Small, silver-furred, with eyes too large and a howl too soft to command respect. Not like the wolves that surrounded me now, all of them daughters of strength, bred from bloodlines that could trace their dominance back generations. I was the healer's daughter, useful when someone was bleeding, overlooked the rest of the time. My gaze drifted across the hall despite my better judgment, past the crush of nervous females and watchful mothers, past the ring of armoured guards who stood like stone sentinels along the walls, and landed on the raised platform at the far end of the chamber. He stood there, and my breath stopped. Ras Kiros, the rogue Alpha King. Even from this distance, he looked exactly like the rumours promised. Massive. Easily a head taller than any wolf in the room, with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the space around him. His hair was dark as a moonless night, woven into intricate braids that fell past his shoulders, some decorated with small metal rings that caught the firelight when he moved. Thick furs draped across those shoulders, grey and silver pelts that spoke of hunts in the frozen northern reaches. Beneath them, black leather armour studded with steel, fitted close enough to reveal the raw power contained underneath. But it was his face that made my wolf whimper and retreat deeper into the shadows of my mind. Brutal. That was the only word for it. All sharp angles and unforgiving lines, a jaw that looked carved from granite, a mouth set in a slash that had probably never smiled. And his eyes. Even from across the hall I could see them. Pale grey, like winter ice over deep water, cold enough to freeze blood in your veins with a single glance. They said he took the throne 7 years ago after his father fell in battle. They said he crushed 3 rival rogue lords in a single month. They said he had no mate, no queen, no weakness of any kind. They said a lot of things. Most of them involved blood. The king will speak with each of you individually. The words cut through the nervous whispers like a blade through silk. The speaker was a scarred wolf named Taurin, Kiros's beta, a man whose reputation for brutality preceded him into every room he entered. His voice carried easily across the stone chamber. "When your name is called, you will approach the platform. You will answer his questions honestly and completely. You will not waste his time." The first name rang out clear and sharp. Senait Wolde. A stunning female with skin like polished bronze and hair that fell in perfect black waves stepped forward. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who had trained for this moment, who knew exactly how to angle her head to expose her throat in submission, while somehow still managing to look seductive. I watched her approach the platform, watched her sink into a curtsy so perfect it could have been choreographed. The rogue king looked at her for perhaps 20 seconds, said something too quiet for the rest of us to hear, then gestured dismissal with one hand, a movement so slight it was almost contemptuous. Sanayat returned to the crowd with her head high, but I saw the tremor in her fingers, the too quick flutter of her pulse at her throat. One by one, names were called. One by one, females approached. One by one, they were dismissed with that same casual flick of his wrist, like he was brushing away insects that had dared to land on his arm. I tried to calm my racing heart, tried to quiet the panicked spiral of my thoughts, but they spun faster with each passing minute. What was I even doing here? I was not like these females. I did not come from warrior bloodlines, or carry the kind of strength that could stand beside a king who conquered territories before his 20th year. I was the overlooked daughter, the one whispered about in disappointed tones, the one whose own pack barely remembered her name unless someone needed herbs ground or wounds stitched. My father had made his position clear when the summons arrived. "Do not embarrass us," he had said, not even bothering to look up from the reports scattered across his desk. "Keep your head down and your mouth shut. With any luck, he will not even notice you are there." The memory burned like acid in my chest. Mezgabeh, Atnafu, my name. For a single frozen heartbeat, I could not move. My legs had turned to stone, my lungs to ice. Then my mother's elbow connected with my ribs, sharp and impatient, and I stumbled forward on feet that felt like they belonged to someone else. The crowd parted like water before a ship's prow. Suddenly there was nothing between me and that raised platform except 30 feet of cold stone floor, and the weight of 100 stairs boring into my back, judging every step, every breath, every slight hesitation. I forced myself to walk steadily, head down, eyes on the floor. Do not draw attention. Do not give them any more reason to remember you exist. But I had to look up eventually. Had to lift my gaze from the stone and see what I was walking toward. Up close, Ras Kiros was not just terrifying. He was overwhelming. The kind of presence that made the air feel thinner, harder to breathe. He towered over me by more than a foot, all coiled muscle and barely leashed violence wrapped in leather and fur. His braids fell forward slightly as he looked down at me, those small metal rings chiming softly with the movement, and I caught the scent of him. Wood smoke, steel, something wild and untamed that made my wolf press flat against my ribs in instinctive submission. His eyes were worse up close, pale grey with flecks of silver, cold as a winter dawn, and deep. The kind of deep that suggested if you fell into them, you would drown before you ever touched bottom. I managed a clumsy curtsy, nearly losing my balance in the process. He did not speak immediately, just studied me with that unblinking predator's focus, his gaze travelling from my face down to my scuffed boots and back up again, cataloguing every detail, every flaw, every sign of the weakness my family had spent years trying to hide. When he finally moved, it was to take a single step forward, closing the distance between us until I had to tilt my head back just to maintain eye contact. Too close. Invading the space around me with the casual assumption of someone who had never once in his life been told no. His voice, when it came, was low, rough, the kind of sound that resonated in your bones before your ears even registered it. "Do you have a mate?" It was not really a question, more like a demand. Like he was used to having information extracted from people with or without their cooperation. I should have said no. Simple. Submissive. The answer he was probably expecting from someone like me. But my mouth opened and something else came out. Something reckless and true. Not yet. 2 words, barely a whisper, but they hit the space between us like a physical blow. I watched his entire body go rigid, watched something dangerous flash behind those winter ice eyes, gold bleeding through the grey for just an instant before he locked it down. His jaw clenched hard enough that I could see the muscle jump beneath his skin. Not yet. He repeated my words back to me, and there was something in his tone I did not understand. Something sharp and raw and almost violent. Not yet. As in you are waiting for someone. As in you already know who he is. No, I started, confusion bleeding through the fear, because I had not meant it like that at all. I just meant I do not have one now. I have never had one. I was not thinking of anyone specific. I did not mean to imply there was someone waiting or someone promised or anything like that at all. But he was not listening. He was circling me now, moving with the fluid grace of a wolf stalking prey, his gaze never leaving my face. The guards along the walls had gone still. The other females in the hall had fallen into tense silence. Even Beta Taurin looked like he was holding his breath. Who? The single word was barely more than a growl. Who are you waiting for? No one, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. I am not waiting for anyone, my king. I only meant that I do not currently have a mate. That is all. He stopped directly in front of me again, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body, close enough to see the faint scars that crossed his knuckles and disappeared beneath the leather of his armor. You do not say, "Not yet, unless you believe it is coming," he said, and there was something almost accusatory in his tone now. You say not yet when you have already decided, when you are certain. I opened my mouth to argue, to explain, to somehow make him understand that it had been a slip of the tongue, nothing more. But then his hand moved, faster than I could track, and suddenly his fingers were beneath my chin, tilting my face up toward his with a grip that was firm, but not quite painful. His thumb pressed against the side of my jaw, holding me in place. And those pale grey eyes were bored into mine with an intensity that made my knees want to buckle. You will stay, he said, and it was not a request. I am not finished with you. Around us, I heard the ripple of shocked whispers, the collective intake of breath. No one had been told to stay. No one had been questioned more than once. No one had held the rogue king's attention for longer than 30 seconds. Until now. He released my chin, but did not step back, did not dismiss me. Just stood there, radiating controlled fury, and something else I could not name, while the entire hall watched and waited to see what would happen next. And I stood frozen before him, heart hammering against my ribs, fire-colored hair falling loose from its braid, trying desperately to understand what I had done wrong, trying desperately to understand why 2 careless words had made the most dangerous wolf in the territories look at me like I had just threatened to take something that belonged to him. He did not give me time to think, did not allow me a moment to process what had just happened, or why I was still standing there, while every other female had been dismissed. His hand closed around my wrist, not rough, but utterly unyielding, and he turned without a word and pulled me toward the far side of the hall. I stumbled after him, my shorter legs struggling to keep pace with his long strides. Behind us, the gathered crowd erupted in whispers, voices rising and falling like a disturbed hive. but I could not focus on any of it, could only concentrate on staying upright as we crossed the stone floor, passed through a heavy wooden door, and entered a corridor lit by torches that threw dancing shadows across walls carved with scenes of ancient battles. We walked for what felt like an eternity. Down one passage, then another, descending stone steps worn smooth by centuries of boots, moving deeper into the fortress until the sounds of the hall faded to nothing, and there was only the echo of our footsteps and the steady burn of his grip on my wrist. Finally, he stopped before an iron-banded door, shoved it open with his free hand, and pulled me inside. The room was massive. A war chamber, I realized, taking in the details with numb shock. Stone walls covered floor to ceiling with maps, some drawn on parchment and pinned in place, others carved directly into the rock. Battle plans, sketched in charcoal. Territory markers made from colored stones pressed into wax. A huge table dominated the center of the space, its surface scarred from years of use, covered with more maps and reports and what looked like military dispatches. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting everything in shades of gold and shadow. He released my wrist and moved to the far side of the table, putting that barrier between us, though it did nothing to make me feel safer. If anything, watching him prowl along the opposite edge like a caged predator made my heart hammer harder. "Who are you waiting for?" The question came again, but this time there was no crowd to hear it. No witnesses, just the two of us and the crackling torches, and the weight of something I did not understand pressing down on my chest. "I am not waiting for anyone," I repeated, forcing the words through a throat gone dry. "My king, I swear to you, I meant nothing by what I said. It was only meant to answer your question. I do not have a mate now. I have never had a mate. There is no one I am promised to or expecting or hoping for. I am nobody's destiny." He stopped moving, stood there with his hands braced on the table's edge, head bowed slightly, those braids falling forward to shadow his face. For a long moment he said nothing, and the silence stretched so tight I thought it might snap. Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound that held no humor at all. "You say not yet like it is inevitable," he said, still not looking at me. "Like you already know he is coming. Like it is only a matter of time before fate delivers him to you." I opened my mouth to argue, to explain again that he was reading far too much into two thoughtless words. But he lifted his head and fixed me with those pale grey eyes, and the protest died in my throat. Why does it matter to a rogue king? The question came out before I could stop it. Quiet, almost a whisper. But in the enclosed space of that chamber, it sounded like a shout. I watched his entire body tense, watched his fingers curl against the table's edge, hard enough that his knuckles went white. For a heartbeat, I thought he might lash out, might show me exactly why questioning someone like him was a mistake people rarely lived to repeat. But instead, something in his expression cracked, just slightly, just enough to let me see past the brutal exterior to something raw underneath. "Because I had one once," he said, and his voice had gone rough. "A fated mate, 7 years ago, before I took this throne, before any of this." The admission hung in the air between us, heavy and unexpected. Her name was Asta. He spoke slowly, like the words were being dragged out of him against his will. Daughter of a pack from the Eastern Territories. We found each other during a gathering not unlike the one tonight. The bond snapped the moment our eyes met. Instant. Undeniable. The kind of connection that happens once in 100 lifetimes if you are lucky. I stood frozen, barely breathing, afraid that if I moved or spoke, he would stop talking, and I would never understand what was happening here. "We had 3 months together," he continued. 3 months of certainty, of knowing exactly where I belonged and who I belonged with. Then a rival pack decided they wanted leverage against my father. They took her. Stole her from her own bed in the middle of the night while I was away leading a hunting party. His jaw clenched, that muscle jumping again beneath his skin. I tore the territories apart, looking for her, burned villages, slaughtered anyone who stood between me and answers. My father tried to stop me, tried to tell me she was already dead, that I needed to think about duty and succession and the future of the pack. So I challenged him, beat him bloody in the challenge circle, and took the throne while he was still gasping on the ground. The casual way he said it made my stomach twist. This was the wolf standing across from me. This was what lived beneath the brutal exterior. "I found her 2 weeks later," he said quietly, "or what was left of her. They had broken the bond by then, severed it deliberately, sir, using dark magic and pain and methods I will not describe. She was still breathing when I reached her, but there was nothing left behind her eyes. No recognition, no spark. Just emptiness where our connection used to be. I felt something tighten in my chest. Something that felt dangerously close to sympathy for a king who had probably never wanted anyone's pity in his entire life. I became rogue to destroy the laws that failed to protect her," he said. "The rules that said rival packs could not be touched without council approval. The protocols that valued political stability over justice. I burned every regulation that stood between me and revenge, and I did not stop until every wolf who touched her was dead." He lifted his gaze to mine, and there was something terrible in those pale grey eyes. Something that made me understand exactly why entire territories dropped their heads when he passed. "So when you whisper, 'not yet,' like you are certain your mate is coming, like fate has already made you a promise, it does not sound like hope to me. It sounds like a threat, because I know how easily that certainty can be ripped away, and I know what it does to the wolf left behind." The confession settled between us like a physical weight. I did not know what to say, did not have words adequate for the kind of loss he had just described. So instead, I said the only truth I had. I have never felt a bond with anyone. I am nobody's destiny, my king. I am a healer's daughter with a weak wolf and no bloodline worth claiming. Whatever you heard in those 2 words, it was not certainty. It was only carelessness. He studied me for a long moment, and I watched something shift in his expression. Not softening exactly, but perhaps reassessing. Then he moved, came around the table with that same predatory grace, closing the distance between us until he stood close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "You do not move like you are weak," he said quietly. "You move like you are waiting to be seen." Before I could respond, before I could even process what that meant, his hand lifted and his fingers brushed against my hair, where it had fallen loose from its braid. The touch was so light it might have been accidental, but there was nothing accidental about the way his gaze followed the movement, tracing the fire-colored strands as they caught the torchlight. "This reminds me of sunset," he murmured, almost to himself. "Right before darkness falls, that last burst of light before everything goes cold." My breath caught. My wolf, who had been cowering in terror since the moment we entered this fortress, suddenly lifted her head with interest. Not fear, something else entirely. The moment shattered as the iron-banded door crashed open behind us. I spun around, heart leaping into my throat, and found Beta Taurin standing in the doorway, with an expression that suggested he had just walked in on something he was not supposed to witness. "My king," he said, and his tone was carefully neutral. "The generals are requesting an audience. They claim it is urgent." Kiros did not move away from me, did not even turn to acknowledge his beta, just kept his gaze fixed on my face like he was memorizing every detail. "Tell them I am occupied." Torin shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "They are demanding it, my king. They say the matter concerns the female you brought to the war chamber." That got his attention. His entire demeanor changed in an instant, going from something almost gentle to pure menace. "What matter?" "They are calling for a trial," Torin said quietly. "They claim she used manipulation or witchcraft to gain your attention. They say she is a threat to the stability of the rogue court and must be examined under formal protocol." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I watched Kiros's hands curl into fists at his sides, watched the gold bleed back into his eyes as his wolf surged close to the surface. "A trial," he repeated, and the words came out flat and dangerous. "Protocol demands it when a female captures the king's interest beyond standard inspection," Torin said, and he sounded genuinely apologetic, especially when that female comes from a bloodline with no warrior status. "The generals are within their rights to request verification of intent." I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. A trial. They wanted to put me on trial for answering a question honestly, for existing in a way that apparently broke some unspoken rule. "When?" Kiros said. "Dawn tomorrow. They have already begun assembling the court." Kiros was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to me, and there was something in his expression I could not read. "You will attend," he said. "You will answer their questions. And you will not be afraid, because I will be standing right there, and any wolf who tries to harm you will answer to me first." It should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like a promise of violence waiting to happen. Torin cleared his throat. "My king, perhaps it would be wiser to send her back to her pack until this is resolved. The generals are already questioning your judgment. If you continue to show favoritism before the trial even begins, it will only fuel their accusations." "No." The word came out hard as stone. "She stays under my protection. If they want to question her intent, they can do it with me present. I will not give them the opportunity to twist this into something it is not." Torin bowed his head in acceptance, though I saw the concern in his eyes. "As you command, my king." Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him, and I was alone with Ras Kiros once more. He turned back to me, and some of that dangerous intensity had faded from his expression, replaced by something that looked almost like regret. "I did not mean for this to happen," he said quietly. "But the rogue court does not tolerate uncertainty. They will demand proof that you did not use manipulation to gain my attention. You will need to be strong tomorrow." "I do not know how to be strong in front of wolves like that," I admitted. "I am a healer, not a warrior. I do not know how to fight accusations I do not understand." "Then do not fight them." His hand came up again, fingers brushing along my jaw in a touch that sent shivers down my spine despite the circumstances. "Just tell them the truth, that you came because you were summoned, that you answered my question honestly, that you have no designs on power or position. Let them see exactly what I see." "And what is that?" I whispered. "Someone who does not realize she is already dangerous." The words hung between us for a heartbeat. Then he stepped back, putting distance between us once more, and gestured toward the door. "Torin will escort you to guest quarters. You will be comfortable there and guarded. Try to rest. Tomorrow will not be easy." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and moved toward the door on legs that felt unsteady. But before I reached it, his voice stopped me. Mezgebe. I turned back. He stood in the center of that war chamber, surrounded by maps of territories conquered and battles won, looking at me with an expression I did not know how to interpret. I meant what I said. You will not face them alone. Then he turned away, dismissing me with that same casual authority he had shown in the great hall, and I was left to find my way out into the corridor where Torin waited with a carefully blank expression. He led me through winding passages to a small but comfortable room, with a narrow bed and a window that looked out over the fortress walls. Left me there with a promise that guards would be posted outside, and that I should not attempt to leave until morning. I sank onto the bed and stared at my shaking hands. Tomorrow they would put me on trial for something I had not done. Tomorrow I would stand before wolves who wanted to see me punished simply for existing in a way that disrupted their carefully ordered world. And tomorrow, Ras Kiros would be watching. I curled up on the narrow mattress, still wearing my dress from the gathering, and tried to quiet my racing thoughts. Tried not to think about pale grey eyes and a touch that felt like it could burn through skin. Tried not to wonder what exactly he had seen in me that made him willing to stand between me and an entire court full of wolves who wanted me gone. Sleep did not come easily, and when it finally did, I dreamed of sunset-coloured light swallowed by darkness, and hands that reached for me through shadows I could not escape. Morning came too soon. I woke to find clean clothes laid out at the foot of the bed, simple but well made, in shades of grey and deep green that would not stand out in a crowd. Someone had also left a basin of water and a comb, small mercies that I accepted gratefully. I braided my hair with numb fingers, trying to make myself look presentable, trying to ignore the sick twist of dread in my stomach. Outside the window, I could see the sun climbing above the fortress walls, pale and cold in a winter sky. The knock on the door came precisely at dawn. Torin stood in the corridor, flanked by two guards, whose expressions gave away nothing. "It is time," he said quietly. I followed him through passages that seemed even longer and more oppressive than they had the night before. Down. Always down, deeper into the fortress until we reached a set of massive double doors carved with scenes of wolves locked in eternal combat. Torin pushed them open, and I stepped into chaos. The hall was packed, not just with the unmated females from yesterday or their families, but with what looked like every ranking member of the rogue court. Warriors in battle-worn leather, generals with scars that told stories of 100 fights, advisors and strategists, and wolves whose eyes tracked my every movement, like predators watching prey stumble into a trap. At the far end of the hall, the raised platform had been transformed into something that resembled a judgment seat. Ras Kiros sat there, sprawled in a chair that might as well have been a throne, looking every bit as dangerous as he had yesterday. But now there were 3 other wolves standing near him, older males with the bearing of career soldiers, and I knew without being told that these were the generals who had demanded this trial. "Walk forward," Torin murmured beside me. "Head up. Do not show fear." I forced my legs to move, forced myself to cross that enormous space, while hundreds of eyes burned into me from all sides. The whispers were louder than yesterday, speculation and accusation blending into a roar that made my ears ring. When I reached the platform, I dropped into the same clumsy curtsy I had managed yesterday, keeping my eyes down, trying to make myself as small and unthreatening as possible. "Mezgebe Atnafu." One of the generals spoke, his voice carrying easily across the hall. "Daughter of Tawadros the healer, low rank, No warrior status, no notable bloodline. He made it sound like an accusation, like the circumstances of my birth were evidence of guilt. You stand accused of manipulation and unnatural influence, he continued, of using methods beyond normal courtship to capture the attention of our king. How do you answer these charges? I lifted my gaze, found Kiros watching me with those pale grey eyes, and drew strength from the slight nod he gave me. I answer that they are false, I said, and was proud when my voice came out steady. I came to the gathering because I was summoned, like every other unmated female. I stood where I was told to stand. I answered the question I was asked. I used no manipulation, no magic, no methods of any kind. I am a healer. I do not know how to do what you are accusing me of. Then explain why the king kept you when he dismissed all others, another general demanded. Explain why you were brought to his private war chamber. Explain why he shows you favoritism when you have nothing to offer this court. The words stung because they were true. I did have nothing to offer. No power, no connections, no reason for someone like Ras Kiros to notice me at all. I cannot explain his choices, I said quietly. I can only tell you mine, and I chose nothing except honesty. A clever answer, the first general said, and there was something mocking in his tone. Perhaps too clever for a simple healer's daughter. Enough. Kiros's voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. He had not moved from his seat, had not raised his voice above a normal speaking tone, but every wolf in the hall went silent instantly. You have questioned her. She has answered. If you have actual evidence of manipulation, present it. If not, this trial is finished. We have protocol to follow, my king, the third general said, and he sounded almost apologetic. The court must be satisfied that no unnatural influence was used. Perhaps a demonstration would ease concerns. What kind of demonstration? Kiros said, and there was warning in his tone. Let us see if she can command the attention of other wolves with the same ease, the general suggested. If her influence is natural attraction, it will not transfer. If it is something more, we will have our answer. I felt ice slide down my spine. They wanted to test me, wanted to parade me in front of other males and see if I could somehow manipulate them the way they believed I had manipulated their king. Before I could protest, before I could point out the insanity of that logic, Kiros stood. The movement was fluid and controlled, but there was violence coiled beneath it. You will not touch her, he said flatly. You will not test her. You will not treat her like an object to be examined and judged by wolves who have already decided her guilt. My king, the first general started, but Kiros cut him off with a gesture. I am not finished. His gaze swept the hall, landing on each general in turn, and I watched them flinch under that pale grey stare. You want to know why I kept her? Why I brought her to my war chamber? Why I show her what you call favoritism? The answer is simple. She interested me. She answered my question in a way that made me want to know more. That is not manipulation. That is not witchcraft. That is simply what happens when someone dares to be honest instead of performing whatever submission that you have decided is appropriate. The hall had gone so quiet I could hear the torches crackling in their sconces. But if you insist on protocol, Kiros continued, then let us follow it completely. She will remain under my protection, as is my right. If you believe she is a threat, you may observe her. You may question her further. But you will do so with the understanding that any harm that comes to her will be answered by me personally. It should have ended there. Should have been enough to satisfy whatever political maneuvering the generals were attempting. But then I saw movement in the crowd, saw one of the generals reach for something on the table beside the platform. My king, he said, his tone too smooth. "Perhaps you should drink. You look strained." He offered a goblet, silver and ornate, filled with dark wine. Kiros took it without hesitation, lifted it to his lips, and I felt something twist in my chest. Something wrong, something that made my wolf surge forward with a panic I did not understand. "Do not," I said, the word bursting out before I could stop it. Every eye in the hall turned to me. Kiros paused with the goblet halfway to his mouth, one eyebrow raised in question. "I do not know why," I whispered, "but please, do not drink that." For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then he lowered the goblet slowly and fixed his gaze on the general who had offered it. "Torin," he said quietly, "test it." The beta moved forward, took the goblet, and poured a small amount onto a silver plate. Within seconds, the metal began to blacken and corrode. The hall erupted, wolves shouting, guards moving to surround the generals. The one who had offered the drink tried to run and was brought down before he made it 3 steps. "Silver nightshade," Torin said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Lethal to alphas, slow acting until it hits critical mass, then kills within minutes." Kiros stood absolutely still, staring at the corroded plate, then at me. "You knew," he said. "I felt it," I corrected. "I do not know how, but I felt something was wrong." The general was being dragged forward now, forced to his knees before the platform. Under interrogation that involved Torin's blade and very little mercy, he broke quickly. "General DeWitt," he gasped, blood running from his split lip. "He wanted the king dead, wanted to take control of the rogue court. He paid me, promised me territory if I succeeded." "Where is DeWitt now?" Kiros demanded. "Fled, my king. He left before dawn. He knew if the poison failed, he would be discovered." The general paused, then added with vicious satisfaction despite his circumstances. "But it does not matter. You already drank from this morning's goblet, the one served with your breakfast." This was only meant to finish what was already started. I watched the colour drain from Kiros's face, watched him sway slightly, hand coming up to grip the arm of his chair. "How long?" he said through gritted teeth. "Minutes," the traitor general said, "maybe less." "Silver Nightshade does not forgive mistakes, my king. You should have been more careful about who you trusted." Then he collapsed. Just went down, like someone had cut his strings, his massive body hitting the stone floor with a sound that made my heart stop. I was moving before I thought, shoving through guards and generals and wolves who tried to grab me, falling to my knees beside him, hands already reaching for his face, tilting it toward mine. His skin was too pale, his breathing too shallow, and I could feel it now, the wrongness spreading through him like poison in water, killing him cell by cell. "There is no antidote," someone was saying behind me. "Silver Nightshade cannot be healed. Even an alpha's regeneration is not fast enough." But I was not listening. Was not paying attention to anything except the way my wolf was screaming inside my head, clawing at my ribs, demanding I do something, anything, to stop this. My hands found the small knife I kept strapped to my ankle, the one I used for gathering herbs and cutting bandages. I pulled it free and slashed across my palm without hesitation, barely feeling the pain as blood welled up hot and red. "What are you doing?" Torin shouted, but I ignored him too. I pressed my bleeding palm to Kiros's mouth, forced his lips apart, let my blood drip onto his tongue. "Blood healing," someone whispered. "Forbidden." I did not care about forbidden or protocols or anything except the way I could feel him dying beneath my hands. "Heal," I whispered, and pushed everything I had into that single command, every ounce of healer's instinct. Every drop of power I had never known I possessed. Heal. The effect was instantaneous and violent. Light exploded from where our skin touched. Not normal light. Something silver and gold and too bright to look at directly. I felt it surge through me like lightning, felt it pour from my blood into his, burning away the poison, knitting torn cells, dragging him back from whatever edge he had been teetering on. But there was something else happening too, something I did not understand. The mark on my collarbone, the one I had carried since birth and never understood, suddenly blazed to life. It felt like someone had pressed a brand directly against my skin, hot and agonizing and impossible to ignore. And I felt something snap into place. Not break, not tear, snap together, like two pieces that had been waiting their entire existence to be joined. The bond. It roared through me with the force of a thunderstorm, connecting me to the male beneath my hands with ties that felt stronger than steel and deeper than bone. I could feel his heartbeat synchronizing with mine, could feel his wolf recognizing my wolf with a certainty that made every other truth I had ever known seem like a guess. Mate. The word echoed through my mind in a voice that was not quite mine and not quite his, but somehow belonged to both of us. Mate. 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 The light faded slowly, leaving after-images burned into my vision. I blinked against the spots dancing in front of my eyes and realized the entire hall had gone absolutely silent. Kiros was staring up at me with those pale grey eyes, and they were clear now, alert. No longer clouded with poison. His hand came up to wrap around my wrist, his fingers pressing against where my pulse hammered beneath the skin. Mine, he said, and his voice was rough, but strong. The word was not a question, not even really a statement, just a fact, as undeniable as gravity. I could not respond, could not do anything except kneel there with my bleeding palm still pressed to his mouth and feel the bond thrumming between us like a living thing. He sat up slowly, never breaking eye contact with me, never releasing my wrist. Around us, I heard the ripple of shock running through the crowd, heard wolves whispering about mates and bonds, and the sigil that was still glowing faintly on my collarbone. Kiros rose to his feet, pulling me up with him, and turned to face the assembled court. His other arm came around my waist, holding me against his side with a possessiveness that left no room for misinterpretation. "She is mine," he said, and his voice carried to every corner of that massive hall. "My mate, chosen by fate and sealed in blood. Any wolf who questions her now questions me. Any wolf who threatens her will answer to both of us." The silence stretched so tight, it felt like the air itself might shatter. Then Torin dropped to one knee. "My queen," he said simply. One by one, the others followed, warriors, advisors, even the generals who had demanded the trial, all of them sinking down in submission and acknowledgement. All except the traitor general who had delivered the poison. He tried to run, made it perhaps 5 steps before Kiros moved, faster than should have been possible for someone who had been dying moments before. The execution was swift and brutal. I looked away before it was finished, but I heard it. Heard the crack of bone, and the wet sound of torn flesh, and the general's scream cutting off mid-breath. When I looked back, Kiros was standing over the body, breathing hard, blood on his hands. He turned to face the court, and there was something almost feral in his expression. "General Dawit has fled," he said, "but he will be found, and when he is, His death will not be quick. Then he was beside me again, pulling me close, one hand coming up to cup my face with a gentleness that seemed impossible given what I had just witnessed. "You saved me," he said quietly, like we were alone despite the hundreds of wolves watching. "You felt the poison. You healed me when there was no cure. You completed a bond I did not know could be completed." "I did not know I could do any of that," I admitted. "I still do not understand what happened." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I saw something in his eyes that looked like wonder. "The bond I thought was broken forever," he said slowly. "The connection severed when Asta died. Somehow it healed. Somehow it found you instead. That mark on your collarbone is not a birthmark. It is a bond sigil. You were meant to replace what I lost, even though I did not believe replacement was possible." Around us, I heard someone call for the healers to examine me, to verify what had happened. But Kiros waved them away with a sharp gesture. "No one touches her," he said flatly. "She is my mate and your queen. You will treat her with the respect that demands. You will protect her as you would protect me. And you will accept that she has just saved the king you claim to serve." He turned back to me, and his expression softened slightly. "I told you that you were already dangerous," he said. I did not realize how right I was. "I am not dangerous," I protested weakly. "I am a healer." "You are my healer now," he corrected, "and my mate, and my queen, and the only wolf in this entire fortress who has the power to save me from my own enemies." He lifted my hand, the one I had cut, and I watched him press his mouth to the wound, sealing it with a kiss that sent shivers down my spine despite the circumstances. "Not yet," he murmured against my skin, echoing my words from yesterday. "You said not yet because somewhere inside you knew this was coming, knew we would find each other eventually." "I think I just meant I did not have a mate at that moment," I said, but there was no conviction in my voice anymore. He smiled then, the first real smile I had seen from him. It transformed his entire face, softening those brutal features into something almost beautiful. "Perhaps," he allowed. "Or perhaps fate knew exactly what it was doing when it put those words in your mouth." He pulled me closer, tucking my head beneath his chin, and I felt the bond settle around us like a blanket, warm and unbreakable. Around us, the court was slowly coming back to life. Wolves talking in hushed tones, guards removing the traitor's body, Torin issuing orders to search for General DeWitt and any other conspirators who might be hiding among the ranks. But in the center of it all, we stood together. The rogue Alpha King and the healer's daughter who had somehow become his queen. "I lost one mate to weakness," Kiros said quietly, his voice meant only for me. "I will burn every territory and kill every threat before I let anyone take you from me." The words should have frightened me. Instead, they felt like the most honest promise anyone had ever made. I tilted my head back to look up at him. This male who had been a terrifying stranger yesterday and was now connected to me in ways I barely understood. "Then do not give me reason to heal you again," I said. "I do not think my heart could survive watching you die a second time." He laughed, a real laugh this time, and the sound of it made something warm bloom in my chest. "No promises," he said, "but I will do my best to stay alive for you." Then he kissed me, right there in front of the entire rogue court, claiming me with his mouth the way he had claimed me with his words. And I kissed him back. This male who had seen through my invisibility to something worth keeping, this king who had been broken by loss, and somehow found healing in the blood of a female he barely knew. The bond hummed between us, certain and unbreakable. Not yet had become always. And somewhere in the fortress, enemies were regrouping, planning their next move, preparing for war. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, I stood in the center of the rogue court, with my mate's arms around me, and let myself believe, for the first time in my life, that I was exactly where I was meant to be.